And now I am here back at Comic-Con, and we have already aired 2 episodes, and we have 2 episodes to go of Greatest Geek Year Ever, 1982. What do y'all think? All right, by show round of applause, how many of you have actually seen the first 2 episodes, either on the CW network? Yes! Yes, it's here! Yes! Or on the CW app, where you can now watch it over and over and over again. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We've been up here many, many times over the years for panels orchestrated by Mark Altman. And we have officially solidified that 1982 is the greatest geek year ever. So, with that, I'm sure there are a few of you who have not yet seen our awesome trailer or have not yet seen the show at all. So here's just a taste of what you will see when you go on the CW app and watch the first episode of Greatest Geek Year Ever, 1982.
Are some very dazzling science fiction films.
There are a lot of great years for movies, but 1982 is the greatest.
That's the year that I officially fell in love with movies.
I can't think of a year during my life that the lineup was equivalent.
Week after week, you have one classic movie after another that holds up 40 years later.
It was this great moment where nerds accidentally won.
There are 2 Steven Spielberg movies coming out within a week of each other.
I remember calling my agents and saying, I don't know how much this is going to do for me, but I think it's going to do a lot for the world.
I'm getting chills even thinking about it. It was one of the most transporting movies I'd ever seen. We certainly argue there were better years for cinema, but there's no greater geek year than 1982.
Greatest Geek Year Ever, 1982. Docu-series premieres Saturday, July 8th. Stream free next day on the CW.
All right, let's hear it. We did it. We made it. It's out there. We got on a fucking network. So with that, I want to introduce 2 partners that we the 3 of us have worked our tails off on this. And we did it during a time, well, quite frankly, you could talk to any filmmaker or a TV producer, any showrunner trying to make anything during the year 2020 or 2021 was truly a mission impossible. But mission accomplished. I want to introduce to you my producing partner, the writer of Greatest Geek Year Ever, 1982, Mark A. Altman.
You know, I like being off to the side. I felt like Artie and Larry Sanders. I may just watch from the back.
No, you are on this panel, and you deserve to be on this panel. I also want to introduce a friend who I met really for the first time in 2016. Too close for comfort. I met him in 2016 when he was making a documentary for the Roddenberry Vault, the deleted scenes of Star Trek, the original series, which is amazing. If you don't have it, it's awesome, but I digress. And now we work together on 1982 Greatest Geek Year Ever. He shot the interviews, he directed the documentary series, and he edited the friggin' thing. More than 100 interviews and clips and behind the scenes and old commercials and what have you. Roger Lay Jr. Come on out, Roger! All right!
Oh, we had a hug him? I didn't know we had to do the hug when we came up.
All right, so first of all, I just want to start with you, Roger. You know, when we finished doing our interviews in November of 2021, I did not see Roger again. I was like, what happened to our documentary? Did it disappear? Did you run away with it? But he finished it. Roger, how proud are you that it's done, and not only did it get finished, but it turned from to be a documentary feature to a 4-part docuseries that aired on a network?
I feel great. It's amazing that we're getting this kind of an audience now on CW and with the app, because we really worked our asses off. This is, you were saying, it's 100 hours, over 100 hours of interviews. You know, we had EPK footage, behind the scenes footage from all these movies, footage that was filmed by the actual filmmakers, like, you know, the director of Beastmaster had all these reels. Henry Winkler had reels, countless reels of home movies.
Super 8 movies.
Yeah. That he gave.
How do you get Super 8 developed in 2023?
Right.
We know now.
We have to go through all of that and figure out a way to not just tell the stories of the making of each movie, because we didn't just want it to feel like a DVD or Blu-ray special feature, and like as we had been stringing them together for each film. We wanted to tell a story of a specific era in the industry, in fandom, you know, in movie going, and how different that is from today. You know, we wanted that thread to carry through the exploration of each film.
So last October, I went with Mark to Spain for the Sitges Film Festival, which is like the greatest fantastic fest in the world, where our documentary feature premiered. And so, you know, I've been covering, you know, as an entertainment journalist, I've been covering the business for like 30 years. And, you know, I'm always the one who's like going on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and everything, you know, posting about the movies I saw, what I thought of them and everything like that. So we're at dinner afterwards, and then I'm going on Twitter to see what people are saying about our feature, which was really cool because it was all good stuff, thank God. But Mark, tell us about how the transition happened to go from a documentary feature to a 4-part
Well, you
series.
haven't really experienced this documentary unless you've seen it in the original Catalan. It was interesting because, of course, in Spain, the film was dubbed in Spanish and Catalan, and during the time that a lot of these films came out in '82 was the Franco era. So we're like wondering how many of these films have people in Spain actually seen, and it was really funny to watch because the films that we knew Conan would get a big response because it was shot in Spain, but like Diner got a huge response, Megaforce, huge response, go figure. I mean, it was so weird to watch that documentary. And I have to say, before we go any further, there are a couple of shout outs we need to give to people in this room who could have done this documentary about. Scott Tipton, great comic book writer and historian, is here. It's good to see you. Horace Austin, who was an associate producer, it's good to see him here with us. John Berry, who was instrumental in taking this from a feature and turning it into a 4-part TV series. So great to have John here. And thank Clay. Everything is going extremely well so far this year. And last but not least, and I have to say most importantly, so I hope nobody is insulted, our co-producer, the great Isaac Altman, the great, no relation. Yeah, there's a little relation. But the co-producer and researcher, his first IMDb credit, and it was truly earned. He worked like a dog for very little pay. These producers really take advantage of the talent. Isaac Altman.
Wait, Isaac, please stand up. This is Isaac Altman. He's still working. So when he was working with us on doing the interviews back in 2021, he was half that size. So now I'm watching the documentary and I'm going who's that guy on the screen talking? He looks like Isaac Altman, but a little bit older. All right, so
And no Nepo baby. He worked really hard.
Well, we all did. We all worked very hard. We did more than 100 interviews between May of 2021 and November of 2021. So basically, it was between Delta and Omicron. When Omicron started to, sort of happen, we were like, okay, that's it. Let's just keep going and just, that's when Roger disappeared into V'ger and just that's 79. But you get
Well, you'll see a few people are like on TV sets because they wouldn't come into the studio because of COVID. So we did them remotely, and that's why they're on these little TV sets. And the next episode, I think, is Rafaela De Laurentiis and Buzz Fetishan, who produced Conan. Like, they were lovely, and they would have been happy to talk to us, but we ended up having to do it remotely because of COVID. And there were a couple of people who we lost because they just wouldn't come into the studio because of COVID, which was unfortunate, but nobody that great.
Okay, but so the first 2 episodes, so episode 1 was called The Summer of Spielberg, because, as you all know, June of 1982, it's one thing for Steven Spielberg to have 2 movies a year, and he's done that many, many times. In 1993, really good year. July, he had Jurassic Park. In December, he had Schindler's List. So that was a good year. And then in 97, I think he did The Lost World and Amistad.
Not as good a year.
Yeah, that was also a good year. And 2022, he did Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can, but I digress. So, but the difference is that in June of 1982, he had 2 movies open 1 week apart. On June 4th, 1982, the same day that Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan opened, Poltergeist opens. 1 week later, E.T. the Extraterrestrial Omens. Now, E.T. he directed, Poltergeist, maybe he directed? And we talk about that in the documentary, but I'm just curious, like, Roger, when you were going through and you were working on what became part one of the series, you know, we know a whole lot about sci-fi and fantasy and horror and all that stuff, but what was something about that first episode, or the first couple episodes that we worked on? That
First
you
couple,
were
there are only
surprised?
4.
Well, there's 4, and we aired 2 of them. So what was something that, like, you didn't even know that surprised you?
That's interesting. I don't know there's a specific thing I didn't know that surprised me. I think it's just the volume of people that were able to speak about sort of the uniqueness of the films that were being greenlit back then. You know, there's a great story in that first episode from Dean Devlin, who went on to produce Independence Day, The Patriot, a lot of huge, big films. You know, and he talks about how now, you know, the kind of films that were being greenlit back then, you know, would never get the green light today.
He said Independence Day would never be made today.
Unless you called it War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
He went into a pitch meeting, they said that same. So, and then Teddy Biaselli, who's one of the major executives at Network, conveyed the same thoughts. Lisa Henson, you know. So that was kind of shocking to me, because I'm so used to those films, because I grew up with them, right? So I was like, this vibrancy in terms of creativity lasted for many years, but now it's not there anymore, and so many people who are now in the industry feel that and realize that, and that was kind of shocking to me, and I agree, they're right, you know. But that first hour was the most difficult to assemble, simply because you couldn't just jump into the summer of Spielberg, right? You couldn't just jump into how, you know, those 2 Spielberg movies came out back to back, and then Wrath of Khan was in theaters at the same time. You really needed to explain everything that led to that moment of reaching critical mass, right? And how the filmmaking of the 70s sort of created something in an organic fashion that now the studios wanted to replicate. And by '82, all of them were firing major motion, you know, major event movies into the theaters, and realizing that the audience that loves these movies, these genre movies, is a significant part of what makes a movie successful at the box office. So you have to explain all that. So we had to backtrack and begin at the 70s, really, with the tour filmmaking of the 70s, and how those sensibilities came into play with filmmakers like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and John Milius, and they were utilizing some of that, but bringing it into a form that was appealing to a huge audience, you know.
Mark, what about you? What was something about maybe the first 2 parts, either Summer Spielberg or sci-fi?
Well, I'll tell you, but before I do that, we had one more person walk in who was part of the documentary, was a bio part of the documentary, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge him. Rob Burnett, where are you? There you are.
Rob Burnett's here. Rob Burnett, you got more screen time than I do.
I have to say, when in trouble, I would go back to the Rob Burnett interview. Because Rob was my guy to give me the turns and help me take the story to the next, you know, horizon, you know. And when Rob and I have worked together many times doing documentaries, so he's great at giving you those, you know, those wayfindings.
Well, this show was made for Rob, because if anyone can talk, it's Rob Burnett. So when you have a 4-part series, who do you call? Not
Burnett, not those
You call
buses.
Robert Burnett, and man, did he, I mean, as great as what he had to say in the documentary, there's so much on the cutting room floor that is great as well. I mean, this could have just been Rob Burnett talking about the film in 1982 for 4 hours. But anyway, Rob, good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for the documentary.
And the wise pearls that you dropped throughout.
Yeah, I think he's in every episode, right?
Yeah. So things in the first 2 that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I've said this before. One of the things that's fascinating, we tried to marry having very high-profile people like Bill Shatner and Henry Winkler and Ron Howard with people maybe that were a little under the radar. So one of the people that I asked, because he'd been on Inglourious Treksperts and I knew he had great stories, was Eddie Egan, who was the unit publicist for Star Trek II. And in the course of interviewing him, and this didn't go in the documentary, it was cut, it was in the longer version, but it got cut, was he told us that the Saavik and David Marcus were cast by Gary Nardino, who was the head of Paramount Television, because the plan had been that if Star Trek II had bombed, they would spin off Saavik and David as a TV series. And that was the plan, had the show not worked. And so Nick wasn't even involved with really casting them. It all was done through Paramount Television with the eye to doing a TV series based on those 2 characters. And that blew my mind, because I know a little something about Star Trek. And so when I heard this, I was kind of shocked to hear it. I never heard that story before. And he was just a font of great information. But Star Trek 2, obviously the Blade Runner stuff in the second episode is really interesting. And of course, you can't beat, Charlie de Lauzirika's amazing Dangerous Days documentary. It's hours and hours and hours.
3 hours.
We really wanted to focus on distilling the story of Blade Runner into good 10, 15 minutes, but also talk about the stuff because they're always going to say the final cut is the best. And I love that there's a little debate going on as to whether or not the narration is a good thing or a bad thing and why it exists. And I think that was a really interesting part of our Blade Runner. But obviously Megaforce is the true zenith of everything in this series. And I gotta say, I got a text from I got an email from Barry Bostwick like 2 days ago who watched it. And he said, I love it, this was great, that's exactly what I did in my joyful, self-deprecating way.
All right, so listen, the Barry Bostwick stuff is gold. And so are so many of these interviews. And I'll get to Ron Howard and Amy Heckerling, the director of Fast Times, in a moment. But for me, the thing that really kind of made me sort of see a perspective. So Adrienne Barbeau, who had a great year for 1982, she had Creepshow, Swamp Thing, and she was the voice of the computer in John Carpenter's The Thing, and she was also Mrs. John Carpenter for quite a while. So we were talking about the month of June and how The Thing was a bomb, even though now it's regarded as one of the greatest horror movies ever, and it is still incredibly disturbing, but still really, really awesome. So I had asked her, why did E.T. become this huge monster hit, no pun intended, and why did The Thing bomb? And she thought about it for a second, and then she said, I'll tell you when John knew that we were in trouble. She said, they were at an airport, and E.T. had already opened, and The Thing was about to open, and E.T. was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. And he looked at me, this is her, she says, he looked at me and he said, we're in trouble. Because that was the alien people wanted to see, clearly because it was such a huge hit. Not the alien as a pandemic that we saw in The Thing.
Well, if the creature in The Thing ate Reese's Pieces, it would have been fine.
But, so definitely the Summer Spielberg Part 1, and then you have this great Part 2 with Wrath of Khan, with The Thing, and Blade Runner, and Tron, and Megaforce. I mean,
Thank you.
Great, this is awesome stuff.
Forget Megaforce.
But, so, part of the reason that we are here is not only to, celebrate that 1982 is the greatest geek year ever. Thank you. But also to show you, for everyone in this room, you will be the first to see exclusive clips from our next 2 episodes.
But only the people who've been watching the first 2. Has everybody been watching, I hope? Who's watching? And if you haven't, go to the CW app, tonight. and just after your parties or whatever, and there are no actors around, you got nothing else to do, right? The documentary on the CW app, it's free, even if you have DirecTV and you can't get it, just go and stream it, it'll be great. Watch it again and again. It gets better the more you watch it.
So that is actually true, because I watched it when it aired, and then I watched it on the app, and I was like, you did a great job editing this thing. It's really, really
Well, there's so much information into every, what is it, we have 40-some minutes on the CW, right, per episode, so with the amount.
47 minutes.
47 minutes, the
A lot of
amount of
stuff.
information, the amount of films we cover each episode is just unbelievable, and we pick up the thread of sort of the industry and fandom and all these other things that are carrying throughout the 4 shows, so.
Are you ready? Are you ready to see an exclusive clip from this Saturday's episode of Greatest Geek Year Ever 1982? All right, so Sylvester Stallone had not 1, but 2 amazing movies in 1982. One of them was obviously First Blood. Here's the other one. I love having control of this.
Well, you're a control freak. What can I say?
John wanted to write the piece himself. That was the only way he would be interested. And we had a little contentious meeting, I'll call it, with Dino about
That's not the right one.
That's Conan.
Well,
You're fired.
Don't blame Clay. It's all your fault this year.
showed it. Maybe you want to see it.
Yeah.
Nothing like
Gotta love live Steve.
killing the buzz by stopping the video.
I went with a friend of mine who's also black to see Rocky III on opening weekend. It's a sellout audience and people are amped. When Mr. T came on screen, my friend and I fell in love with his character. We were loudly cheering for Clubber Lang. Get him, knock him out, knock him out. You know, and then he does knock him out. And the entire theater goes quiet. Me and my buddies' voices are the last ones echoing, yeah! And it's just, you could hear pin drop, silence. And I leaned over to my buddy and I said, Rocky better win at the end of this movie or we're gonna have to go out the back exit.
You should tell everyone who that is in the interview. They didn't have the lower third.
Yeah, well, from the clip, but yeah, that's Darren Scott, producer of Menace to Society. He's done a lot of other great stuff. He's a terrific guy. He directed Deep Blue Sea too. But what I love that you don't see in that clip is David Goodman, our chief negotiator for the WGA, who's awesome, talks about the fact that Rocky III, unlike Rocky I and II, which are very much 70s movies, Rocky III is an 80s movie. He says it's a superhero movie because basically you have Rocky, who's your superhero, has to team up with his old nemesis, Apollo Creed, to basically fight Thanos. And it's completely different from Rocky I and Rocky II, which are really grounded, dramatic movies. And then suddenly Rocky III, it's like a superhero movie. And he's not wrong, because by the time Rocky IV comes around a couple of years later, you know, Sly is bringing down the Berlin Wall and saving America from godless communism in Rocky IV, right?
All right, so for the upcoming episode this Saturday on the CW, 8 p.m. Eastern and Central. So we're covering action films and we're covering fantasy. So what are some of the revelations that we can see from this third episode?
Oh, you know, actually Dark Crystal has some really interesting comments from...
yeah, the Dark Crystal! Woo! Dark Crystal!
Jim Henson's daughter is in that segment, and she talks about how important that movie was for Jim, that he actually, you know, he had sold the Muppets, I think, everything, had sold everything, and he used a lot of that money to bankroll the film. That's how much he believed it.
No, to buy the film back.
Buy the film
because
back.
it wasn't testing well.
Yeah, it wasn't testing well. The
And he
investor
believed in it so much, he sold them up. Yeah, he bought the Muppets back and Dark Crystal.
and bought it back.
I called the kids and said, you know all that money we have from Sesame Street and the Muppet Show and everything? Well, I'm using it all. You're
He said that
inherited.
he had a family meeting and he told everybody, this is what I'm doing with the money, just so you guys know, in case we get evicted a month from now. That's great. I don't know that anyone other than Jim would have had the nerve to do that in terms of believing in the story. And obviously history has proven that he was right.
Because then he sold it all to Disney for $1 gazillion.
So what about some of the action films that we've seen?
Well, I mean, I think I really like the third episode because, as you'll see in the Conan clip coming up, we got the outtakes from Orson Welles' commercials trailer for Conan, because at the time, you got to remember, fantasy was not a respectable genre, right? It was people it was looked down upon. It was like a B movie. It was Roger Corman. So when they did Conan, it was a big risk. So he said, how do we make it prestigious? We hired somebody like Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, to do the thing. And we got these, he did not want to be there. You know, he was doing it for the money. And so we have the outtakes from that recording session, which are fantastic, and how he refuses to say rated R, nobody admitted under 17 without a parent. It's great. I love that. And then, you know, some great stuff on Tron. Obviously, First Blood is fascinating because, of course, the original ending of First Blood, Rambo died, right? Spoiler alert. And then they realized, you know, Sly wanted to change it so that he doesn't die. You wouldn't have all the Rambo movies had he died. And the other thing that was really interesting that I know is Chris Mulkey told us that originally Kirk Douglas had been cast as Troutman, but he started butting heads with Stallone because Stallone kept making his role smaller and Stallone's role bigger. So he's like, I'm not doing this. He leaves, and they have to hire Richard Crenna, who's so amazing, like on no notice. And so he comes up like the first day of filming to do Troutman. So there's a lot of really interesting things, I think, in that third episode that's coming up.
So here's the thing. So in 1982, in the summer of 1982 especially, I was 13 years old. And to be a 13-year-old geek in the summer of 82, to have all of these movies come out one after another, I mean, I just thought that this is the way movies were supposed to be. I just thought...
About a Star Trek bar mitzvah.
I had a Star Trek bar mitzvah. Absolutely, I had a Star Trek bar mitzvah, and I'm damn proud of that. Oh, I should show pictures.
Please don't.
Yeah, on the movie version. So, but to be 13 and to be like, gee, it's June 4th, do I go see Wrath of Khan or Poltergeist? Well, duh, of course I'm going to see Wrath of Khan.
Ask your rabbi.
And I told a great story about how when I saw Wrath of Khan and Spock died, and I got home and I was all set and I was crying in my room, and I laid out all my Star Trek merchandise, all my photo novels, my trading cards, my poster books, and I was crying. My dad knocked on the door. He says, "What's the matter?" And I was like, Spock died! And my dad, who is, I love him dearly, but he's not the hippest guy in the world. But he looked at me, he rolled his eyes, and he said, "Don't worry, he'll be back." But I got to 1983, and I was like, well, every year is not like 1982. But I'm curious, are there any around 13-year-olds in the audience here? Okay, good. Okay, yeah, good. Okay, all right. So for 13-year-olds today, you have Barbenheimer. But we had Wrath of Khan, and Poltergeist, and E.T., and Blade Runner, and Thing, and Tron. Tron was awesome. But let us now see the clip I was going to show before for Conan. So you had Stallone and Schwarzenegger both releasing movies in the same year. And now look at them, now they're old. All right. Let's roll this next clip.
John wanted to write the piece himself. That was the only way he would be interested. And we had a little contentious meeting, I'll call it, with Dino about the casting of the movie. He was not initially convinced that Arnold was the correct person to have play Conan.
Dino was concerned that Arnold had an accent.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of the women.
And John immediately said, well, but Dino, you have an accent. Got Dino sufficiently angry. John came up with a solution. He said, Dino, I have a great idea. If you don't want to use Arnold to play Conan, I have the perfect person to do it. This will solve all your problems because he's a great movie star. John said, Dustin Hoffman. At that, he said, okay, get out of here, go make your movie.
I think it might be one of the best uses of Schwarzenegger ever on film. Before that, Pumping Iron was great. Nobody had really figured out what to do with that guy yet. Milius figured it out.
And you sort of see the emergence of a genuine movie star.
We got an X 3 times on Conan. One of the things that we did to finally get an R from an X was we had to discolor the red from the color of the blood because that was their big complaint.
Conan was not marketed as a dumb fantasy muscle man movie. It was marketed as a blood-soaked epic.
Dino did not like the movie very much. Felt it was too violent. He went with great trepidation to this preview in Las Vegas. We filled the movie theater and there were more people out there and they were all hardcore fans. It was a multiplex, so we had 3 theaters going. There was still reels of film, so we took one reel from projector of the screening room 1 to screening room 2 to screening room 3. The audience went wild. Having said that, Dino continued complaining for years. Had it been a lower rating, it would have made a lot more money. We loved the movie. We loved making it and we loved watching it. I think Dino was very proud of the movie.
The problem at the time was sword and sorcery and fantasy was considered a B-level genre. So how do you elevate it? How do you put the imprimatur of class well, you get the most prestigious filmmaker of all time, Orson Welles, to do your narration for the radio spots.
When Welles came out to the recording studio, he was out of breath, in a bad mood, he was very cantankerous.
I'll take my own time, I don't need any directions. Just bring me a glass of water and that's the end of it. Get done with this thing. You I won't do it. I won't do it. You have to get an announcer for that. I don't do that kind of thing.
And I told the engineer, the moment Welles steps into the studio, keep the tape rolling. So in fact, what he didn't want to say, I recorded.
It isn't because I think I'm too good to say this kind of stuff. But technically, if you go from this kind of casting of the spell, within a 30-second thing, you suddenly say under 17, not admitted without a parent, it's almost a joke. It's a bad laugh. Whereas if a different voice says it, it's simply an obligatory statement. You know what I mean?
He was in terrible shape at that time, except for his voice. It was still the Orson Welles voice. And he said, Merv, now I'm out of breath. And the truth is, I don't want to do this thing now until I'm rested.
Thief, warrior, conqueror, king, Conan the Barbarian, out of an age I dreamed of, comes the most incredible adventurer of all. Conan the Barbarian, from Universal Pictures. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
Wow. That is the Citizen Kane of trailers. So,
Rosebud.
all right, so Mark, was there one interview throughout the course of shooting that you really, really, really tried to get? One interview you was maybe close and like you just didn't have?
What? It didn't happen?
That did not happen. Like, who would you really, really want that it just didn't happen?
I don't know, we pretty much got everybody. We had
Cameron Crowe was one that we almost didn't get, and he ended up doing it. Same thing, he said he wouldn't come in.
There was one person who I was really close to getting, and we had 5 back and forth email exchanges, and he was asking a lot of questions about the doc, and it sounded like I'm gonna get him, and I was like telling Mark, I was like, oh my God, I think we're gonna get him, and he kept texting me, what's the story, is it? I'm like, I'm working on it, and then Isaac is stressing me out, it just was like crazy, and then I wanted, but did not get, but was so close to Mr. T. I know.
Thanks for reminding me of that, man. So I'm gonna give you a hard time about that.
I totally forgot
You
about
kept
that.
texting me.
You know what? I prefer to think about the people we did get.
And
Bill
then I'm
Snyder,
like,
Cameron
Isaac
Crowe,
is
Eddie
telling you,
Hickerling.
and you said Isaac is telling you, like, where's Mr. T? And I'm like, stressing me out. So, okay. So that's episode 3.
I got Dr. Z. No.
You got Dr. Z from Battlestar
Oh no, I
Galactica
was Bobby
1980.
Risk. You could have had him if you wanted him.
All right, so that's episode 3, which is on the CW this Saturday, 8 p.m. Pacific, Eastern, on the CW app the next day. So then the week after that is our 4th and final episode. And boy, are we going out big with comedy and horror. And boy, do we have gold in this 4th episode. So let's talk about the comedies of 1982, Roger.
Night Shift.
Go for it.
Oh my God, it's interesting. No one really cares about that movie, it seems. And it's so funny. It's such a tricky piece. The mixed tones. There's so many different tones in that film. And it was an early film for Ron Howard, and Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton have amazing performance, great screen comedy duo there. But the great thing was just that Henry and Ron had such an important friendship and relationship already, that Henry basically said, look, whatever you need me, I'm there. And the making of that movie was very important for Henry as well, because he wanted his friend to succeed. So we covered that story quite nicely in the documentary, thanks to the fact that Henry was filming with his home movie camera, all this Super 8 footage. And it's just incredible to see someone as beloved and as successful as Ron Howard just kind of struggling early on, There's a moment at the restaurant, right, where he's sitting there, and Henry films him in the middle of this empty set. It's a restaurant, but it's a set basically. And he's just sitting there like this, looking at his notes, trying to figure out the day. And that footage is just kind of priceless. And the fact that it's Henry and Ron on camera talking to us, telling you the story of their friendship and how important that movie was for them personally and professionally. fantastic.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the movie, the premise is, a lot of you may not be, it's about these two people who set up a brothel in the New York County morgue. But of course, they're not pimps, they're love brokers.
Love brokers!
You know, again, it's great to shine. One of the things we love was shining a light on these movies that maybe didn't get great bonus features ever on a DVD or Blu-ray, or that people maybe aren't as much a part of the conversation as some of the more high-profile movies. I think we did that a lot. You know, that's why people, I think, were so excited about Megaforce. But also, you know, Night Shift is another example of that. Yes, we have 48 Hours, and yes, we have Tootsie, and yes, we have obviously Fast Times in a big way, and even Zapped, which Rob has some great comments about.
Zapped!
But you know, Night Shift gets a lot of love, and a lot of that is because Henry and Ron's love for this movie comes across really well, and obviously having those home movies were just gold.
So the thing is that this was Ron Howard's first studio film. He already directed Two Lane Blacktop. That was an indie. But so first of all, we go to Ron Howard's.
No, he didn't. No, he
Grand Theft Auto is not, no.
Ron Howard, you're talking about Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto, thank you, yes. 3 words, cars. Put me a bone here! Fires. You're stressing me out. All right, so we go to Henry Winkler's home, and he was seriously, I mean, every rumor you heard about, oh, it's like the nicest guy in Hollywood.
Oh, tell the story.
That is actually true.
What he did.
But so what happened was he loved the interview so much that he helped us get Ron Howard.
That's not the story.
He said Ron Howard is he loves the film, he's proud of the film. You know, Night Shift helped launch Imagine Films with Brian Grazer, and then he says, oh, I got these great home movies that I shot during the making of Night Shift. Did you want them? And I'm like, we all look at each other and go, sure. So here is a clip, and I'm going to show the right one this time. Here is a clip. And you were going, not only are you the first to see this clip from episode 4 of Greatest Geek Year Ever 1982, you are the first person in the entire universe outside of Henry Winkler's own family to see Henry Winkler's own personal home movies behind the scenes making Night Shift. Here we go.
Not only does 1982 have all of these wonderful genre films, but it has peak comedy.
Prostitution! Are you kidding, Alex? What is it? We can say it. We're big kids now, right?
If there's one person in Hollywood who lives up to his reputation as one of the nicest men in Hollywood, it's Ron Howard. He got his big break because Roger Corman directed. In 1982, you really see what a fine director he's going to become with Night Shift. It has a premise that probably would never get greenlit today. These two guys who work in a morgue end up becoming pimps, a real comedic tour de force.
Pimps? Are you saying we should become pimps? Pimps is an ugly word. Because us love brokers.
So I was doing the Fonz on Happy Days. I had done the first 7 years with Ron Howard, and Ron said, I'm thinking of being a director. What do you think? I said, Ron, if you wanted to be a brain surgeon, whether I needed it or not, I would be your first patient.
Well, my contract for Happy Days was up. And while I loved the people on the show, it was holding me back a bit. Now, I was making films. I'd made 4 films while I was on Happy Days. They were television movies or the Roger Corman movie, which was made on a very fast schedule.
Grand Theft Auto, directed by and starring Ron Howard.
I could just see that one of the reasons why I was struggling to get feature films was that they didn't believe I really had time. They really thought of the feature directing as a sort of hobby. I felt I needed to take a leap and make a commitment.
We're doing Happy Days now. I don't have a Ron Howard. My brother, my acting partner.
There was a breakthrough from the studio. They said CBS will pay $5 million in pre-sale for Night Shift if Henry Winkler stars in it, with you directing. This combination is something that they're willing to invest in. It was very important to me to make an R-rated movie initially. I didn't want people to think this was the guy from Mayberry and Arnold's Diner. So Brian Grazer's idea which was sort of inspired on an article that he read in the New York Times that a couple of guys had been caught running a prostitution ring out of the New York City morgue. His concept so fit the bill in terms of the kind of irreverent, sexy, high concept that I was looking for.
Now, he told me, he confided in me, I'm 25. I'm doing a studio film. This crew has done every film under the sun. They have years and years of experience. Are they going to listen?
Hold it, back up. And action.
Ron is and was so confident in what he wanted his movie to be that he would stop for a minute to think. And I'm telling you, you saw the entire cast and crew go, that is not even hyperbole. I just totally trusted him.
Working on Night Shift is where I discovered that I actually loved shooting in the streets of New York and also just about any big city. As difficult as it can be to get the shooting permits, as frustrating as it can be, you have to deal with traffic issues. There's just something about those places and storytelling that just fuel one another.
Feeling all right this morning? Great. Yeah, me too. Yeah. We didn't get snow and we didn't really get our skyline, but here we are. Making movies.
The scene where we're running down the street at the end is my neighborhood. My mother was there standing on the street corner watching us film. It was like just incredible.
The movie had tested incredibly well. David Geffen wanted to buy our points in this movie. He was so sure when he saw it that it was going to be a massive, massive moneymaker.
And then you have this wonderful film that I think got the award for the worst publicity campaign of 1982.
Lumley's a nice guy. The only time he gets to rest in peace is at the office.
City morgue.
It never really got the steam in the movie theater because people got confused about what it was.
That was a disappointment. It was a really big year for movies, but exciting for Brian and I, but also the sort of our generation to begin to plant a flag and say, we're going to make the 80s be sort of about our introduction to you audiences.
One of the great compliments of my life is that Ron, on the last scene, 59, the last take, one, he said, that's a wrap. Henry, here's the clacker. I've had it since. I love it with all my heart. I love him. I love the movie. And it's a wrap.
Get out of here!
I don't know about you people. This is a morgue. You're partying in a morgue.
Okay, how cool is that? How cool is that? So when we finally were able to get Ron Howard, so he was in London mixing 13 Lives, which is a really good movie. It's on Amazon Prime, excellent film. So he's in London, I'm in LA. It's still during COVID, so I Zoomed with him. We hired a local producer who put up a camera to shoot the interview, and then I'm sitting there doing the interview with him on Zoom, and then I'm watching the documentary going like, wow, it's like I was like there. But I was in a Zoom, Zoom is awesome. Thank God it's been a lifesaver. So this is episode 4. So, for everyone who's here right now, make sure you go on social media and say you've been to this awesome panel and spread the word. Spread the word about Greatest Geek Year Ever 1982. The social media is how you spread the word. So go on Facebook, go on Instagram. If you want to use Twitter.
Threads.
That's fine. We'll allow it under the circumstances. We have
1982 movies, that 1982 movies.
Any other party words before we show our final clip here? Because all these movies, especially people think like E.T., oh my God, it's like the biggest movie in 1982, and I think it was the biggest movie ever until, that movie about the ship and the iceberg. What was it called? I forget. But what Okay, do we have any prizes, anything to give?
We have no prizes, but did people get posters? And if not, there's still gonna be some more. Whoever came in late, shame on you for doing that. They're
All right,
gonna be
I just gotta ask,
But you shouldn't
first
be
person who
leaving.
raises your hand.
You should be leaving because the next panel is Free Enterprise and Blu-rays for experts, so I expect you all to stay.
All right, so for just real fast, the first person to raise their hand. I didn't ask the question. What won the Oscar for Best Picture? Okay, you. Gandhi. You watched the show, didn't you? But you'd be surprised how many people do not know that Gandhi, a 4-hour film directed by Sir Richard Attenborough, which I saw once, won Best Picture over E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which I saw 50 times. But let's take a look at this final clip. What? Go ahead. Yeah, 5 minutes. All right, perfect time. All right, so let's see how many people can guess who won the Best Picture Oscar.
Just have this really remarkable year. There is a diverse group of films ranging from comedies.
Do I look like a dame?
Not as much as I do.
I would turn out charming.
To dramas.
And no one's told me that he wouldn't go back to China until he had achieved something in America.
Even in terms of traditional romances like An Officer and Gentleman, which was one of the most successful movies of the year.
Got a girl now to one?
No, I ain't looking for one either.
What are you looking for?
And in a year in which you had Blade Runner, The Verdict, Diner, My Favorite Year, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, all these amazing films. What wins Best Picture?
1982, Best Picture, I don't know, Ordinary People.
For Best Picture?
82. It's gonna be something forgettable. Oh no, I have no idea.
Not Tootsie. Vice Squad, Silent Rage.
My favorite year.
Fitzcarraldo.
Annie. The Year of Living Dangerously.
I would assume that Sophie's Choice would be the Oscar winner that year, but I'm probably wrong.
Gandhi won that year.
Who the hell is he?
I don't know, son.
I distinctly remember that because I didn't know what it was.
Gandhi.
Wow, really?
My name is Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi.
What?
Gandhi.
We don't want you here. I suggest you get back on that train before it leaves.
Gandhi.
I don't remember what happened. I know he wore a robe and he had a stick.
I've actually never even seen Gandhi. I have no.
Did Gandhi ever say deeds, not words? Yes, he probably did. But not as bad as I did.
Gandhi was a lovely movie.
It was epic.
That was not a better film than E.T.
Should Gandhi have won Best Picture over E.T.? It certainly does not have the impact that a movie like E.T. had.
It was obvious to anyone in America in 1982 that E.T. was a phenomenon. So I couldn't wrap my brain around E.T. not winning for Best Picture.
At the time, Entertainment Tonight allowed me to do kind of an editorial saying that much as I respected Richard Attenborough's film Gandhi, in the years to come, people would look back and say, how could they have given it to Gandhi when E.T. the Extraterrestrial came out the same year? They was robbed by a backward-thinking academy. Because for decades, the Best Picture Award always went to a movie that was important, with a capital I, while they gave lots of awards to E.T. the Extraterrestrial, so they clearly appreciated the movie and even loved the movie. It was not an important movie.
I feel like the Academy Awards is the story that Hollywood wants to tell the world about itself every year. Look at who we are. Look at what's important to us. Isn't Hollywood amazing? Aren't our values fantastic? That's what the Oscars are. That's what they're trying to do and promote. And that year was such an unbelievable flashpoint of so many filmmakers hitting their stride and just this amazing explosion of stuff that still, 40 years later, resonates enormously loudly in pop culture. So, Best Picture to me became irrelevant that year.
All right, so with the 1 minute we have left, I just want to say again, Absolutely, spread the word. Make sure to watch it on the CW app because you can watch it anytime you want, as many times as you want. Again, please do spread the word on social media to watch a 1982 Greatest Geek Year Ever 1982 because
Saturdays at 8 o'clock.
if you watch it, if enough people watch it, we will do another
sequel.
Greatest Geek Year Ever. Wait a minute. So now,
He said 99.
I know.
I know.
Okay, so, what year should we do next? 88, 99, I heard. What else? 94, 94 is a good one. What else do I hear? 94, do I hear 97? Do I hear 97? Do I hear 84? Do I hear 87? 64, 64, Hard Day's Night. Do I hear 68? Planet of the Apes, 2001 Space Odyssey. Okay, doesn't matter. Just spread the word so more people watch Greatest Geek Year Ever.